So we didn't get quite through the end of the chapter last time. So we'll pick up some of the things we talked about last week: the essence of mind, original face, Buddha nature, emptiness. All these words mean the absolute calmness of the mind. So he's saying Buddha nature. He's saying actually our own spiritual nature, this divine identity of ours, lies in the absolute calmness of mind when the stories stop. And he says, one of the other things I highlighted from last week, even though you do not realize it, you have it, this realization. So when you say this is delusion, that is actually enlightenment itself. If you try to expel the delusion, it will only persist the more, and your mind will become busier and busier trying to cope with it. This is not so good. Just say, oh, this is just delusion, and do not be bothered by it. When you just observe the delusion, you have your true mind, your calm, peaceful mind. When you start to cope with it, you'll be involved in that delusion. So that's the last bit that we read. And that is amazing advice right there, which is very, very important to understand. When he says that when you see delusion in your mind, the reason that he says that's enlightenment is because it's your perfect self in the back that is recognizing delusion, right? And when you're sitting there in meditation and you're seeing what do you call it, a noisy mind or a disturbed mind, you're actually sitting in your enlightened mind in order to see a disturbed mind. Right? You're sitting outside of it in your peace, and that's how you are recognizing the noise and the change. And so that's what he's saying. He's saying that it's only because we are already enlightened, only because we already have this Buddha nature, this presence of God, this oasis of calmness within, the inner shrine, all these different words for this place, free of ego, free of mind, free of time. And it's because we have that space that we can actually determine truth, that we can actually determine right living. It's because of this knowing space within. And so just to know that is one thing. But what I find much more interesting is getting in the habit of letting your faults remind you of this perfected space that allows you to see your faults, right? So that we become more and more aware of the self within this beautiful place that is indicated by all of the rapid change and noise of the mind, body, and outside world, seeming outside world. And so use those things to point to the truth. And that's what he's referencing here, because we don't, his very first paragraph in this book says, we don't sit to become enlightened. We sit to realize our enlightenment. That this is a condition, this is not a condition, this is our nature. This is what we are. All the rest of it is just seeming conditions of mind. It's unreal. So whether or not you attain enlightenment, just to sit in zazen is enough, right? Just to sit in awareness of that awareness within. Awareness of awareness, right? Awareness is God herself. Awareness of awareness is the devotee. All right, so ours is to be aware of awareness, and that awareness itself is the presence of God within you. So he says, just sitting in that presence is enough. Just sitting in that awareness is enough, because it's at least sitting in the company of your nature. And in that you will see correctly. That will comb your soul, as it were, comb your mind, take all the tangles out. Maya will straighten up a little bit. When you try to attain enlightenment, then you have a big burden on your mind. Your mind will not be clear enough to see things as they are, right? It's because only in still mind, when the thought is stopped, only then can we see clearly, because we're fully present. We're fully in that space of enlightenment within. When you try and go out and achieve enlightenment, you're going to use the mind to do that. And just using the mind, putting perspectives into it, using its different memories and ideals to try and produce your sense of enlightenment is just going to keep the mind noisy and keep it messy. And all of that thinking prevents your awareness from taking in the moment in its true state. Everything will be interpreted through a dirty filter if you've got the mind running. You only see clearly when you retreat into this self and look through an empty mind or through a quiet mind that things are what they are, and that you begin to understand the way things are. If you truly see things as they are, then you will see things as they should be. On the one hand, we should attain enlightenment. That is how things should be. But on the other hand, as long as we are physical beings, in reality, it is pretty hard to attain enlightenment. That is how things actually are in this moment. But if we start to sit, both sides of our nature will be brought up, and we will see both as they are and as they should be. Because we are not good right now, we want to be better. But when we attain the transcendental mind, we go beyond things as they are and as they should be. In the emptiness of our original mind, they are one. And there we find our perfect composure. Now, this kind of sets up, to me, something quite wonderful, very exciting, and truly beautiful, that you are actually the portal between Brahman and Shakti. You as a human construct, as we are, as we're put together, we contain both and access both. That within us is what we call that shrine, that center of profound peace, where the presence of the beloved is always present and always perfect. We have that quiet space accessible to us through the quiet of mind, through the stillness of thought. And then we also have the active mind, which is Shakti. And we have that aspect, the power of God, manifest within us. Because as we've said many times, this cool thing that never ceases to amaze me, that you have the entire universe in your mind. We have no access to the outside world. We only have mental interpretations of a presumed external world fed to us through the senses, right? Through the five senses. So Shakti is the active mind. It's the creation that God creates the universe within your mind. And you have, when you step back out of that, become the pure observer with no thought or calculation about the content of mind, but you step into the shrine, then you have access to this absolute, unchanging self, the Brahman, And we say that because Ramakrishna says quite clearly that pure mind and Brahman are one. And so that only leads to say that if mind in its pure state is Brahman, that which is beyond describing, then the power of God, the whiteness of milk or the heat of the fire, the Shakti, would have to be active mind, the mind with thought and story in it. And you get this delightful position of being a portal between the two. And that it's for you to find the quiet self, because you were born into, seemingly, the active self, the active mind. And so you've lived in this universe. And so coming to know this, it's intense, the truth of our nature. I mean, it's it's at least mind-boggling. There's so much huge I don't know what you would call it, just an immense potential in you and me, just unbelievable. Usually religion develops itself in the realm of consciousness, seeking to perfect its organization, building beautiful buildings, creating music, evolving a philosophy, and so forth. These are religious activities in the conscious world. But Buddhism emphasizes the world of unconsciousness, or the world of non-particulars, the world of silence that comes before thought, before the manifested world, this unchanging absolute, the presence of the divine within. So that's what, not just Buddhism, that's what Vedanta is also trying to emphasize. We start with churches. That's why Vivekananda makes that statement. He says it's great to be born into a church or a temple. He says it's terrible to die in one, which means that this conscious world is meant to be transcended. It's pointing at this whole manifested world is just billions of objects, all of them with their little fingers, pointing at the internal absolute which sustains them within you. You, the dreamer. It's actually God, the dreamer, but we're going to drop that distinction for a second. That you, the dreamer, are responsible for the maintenance of the dream. As soon as you wake up, that entire dream is gone. That entire creation that you experienced as the dream world disappears in a snap. And the body you were using in that dream world disappears in a snap. And your character within the dream disappears within a snap. And all that you're left with is the nature of the sleeper, the dreamer themselves, you see. And so to live in this world is to live in a dream world that depends on the beloved, the divine beloved, because it turns out that you're actually not the sleeper or the dreamer, that the divine is the quote sleeper or dreamer, and his or her presence, that presence within you, that image of God that is our creation, is what sustains this entire illusion. And so when Ramakrishna says that when you climb the stairs to the roof of the building, you come to the roof and you realize that the stairs and the roof are all made out of the same substance. Well, what is that substance? We know that substance is mind substance. When you close your eyes right now and you think of an umbrella, for whatever reason, you have an umbrella in your mind. It's created. There it is. What is it made of? It's made of thought. It's made of mind. It's made of what? The divine. Who knows? What is a thought? I spent months last year trying to figure out what a thought was, and really can't go any deeper than what the scriptures say, that it's a vritti, a wave in the mind. It's just disturbance. And so it's the power of God. And so, but all of the objects in the world are made of this thought material, this mind material. That's not different from a dream, in the sense that when you dream, yes, you see mountains. Yes, you see wood and metal and steel and concrete and, water and all of those things. But none of those things are in your head. You don't have the 5 elements between your ears to play with. It's all made of mind stuff. It's all made of God.
Even relationships, right?
Especially relationships. Especially relationships. Yeah, I just read an article about a problem they're having in Japan with young men falling in love with these AI anime characters online. So you can bet your bottom dollar relationships are right up there with fantasy. But yes, but this is the fascinating thing. So this world that you're in right here, including me on the screen, everything here is made up of mind stuff for you. You're not seeing the actual thing. You're not seeing the original me or the original anything. Everything that you're seeing is your mind's mental symbol for the thing given to it by the senses. And so it's made of the same mind stuff as the dream world is. Let that blow your mind for a moment. You think about that you live in dream stuff. And when Thakur is talking about clay elephants and clay mice, there's no need to think of clay elephants and clay mice, because he's talking about everything here. Everything here is a Brahman elephant and a Brahman mouse, made of the same mind stuff as the things in your dreams. And so to find that stillness within is very important, because that allows you to see without mind interpretation, without the symbols and wheel of samsara churning with your stories, telling you what the world is like and telling you what you are, telling you who you are. Without all of that, things become clear, things become crystalline. Buddhism emphasizes this world of unconsciousness. The best way to develop Buddhism is to sit in zazen, just to sit with a firm conviction in our true nature, that firm conviction on the presence of from the bhakti side, that firm conviction of the presence of the divine within you, that intimate connection, that there is no separation between you and your beloved. And call that beloved awareness if you want to, in the sense of this jnani here, or unconsciousness or emptiness. That's why he gave us that list that I started with of all the things that refer to Buddha nature, or our true nature, or our enlightenment, our true self. So just to sit with the mind focused on that stillness, focused on the awareness of awareness, in that silence, we touch the divine. We come to know the truth of things, not as an addendum, but as an eternal isness, something that has always been and will always be. This way is much better than to read books or to study the philosophy of Buddhism. Yes, practice is better than reading, for sure. Of course, it is necessary to study the philosophy. It will strengthen your conviction. Buddhist philosophy, and also just keep you pointed in the right direction. For years, you can waste years of life changing or charging after an untruth, or holding on to something that's not quite accurate. And if you're in the mind, if you're living in the world of the changing, that's always a constant danger, which is one of the reasons I talk about being careful of who you read, or being wise about who you read. Let's say that more than being careful. Just be wise about whose information you put into your own mind. Buddhist philosophy is so universal and logical that it is not just the philosophy of Buddhism, but of life itself. Indeed, it's sourced in the Vedas, right? And from the Vedas came this Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga is what is the basis of Buddhism, as practiced by Buddha, and then interpreted and added to by cultures that adopted it and took it in. But its root is the Vedanta. Its root lies in Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga is about life itself. It's not about an interpretation of life. It's not about a way to live. It's not about all of those things. Jnana Yoga is life itself. And the best studied scripture is life itself. And how do you study life itself as a scripture? Discernment, discrimination. That's what discrimination is. Discrimination is pulling scripture out of the thin air you breathe, around you everywhere, to constantly look and keep your eyes open and aware to what I like to refer to in my sentimental self as the love letters from the divine. The little things in the day where God has hidden a truth for you to see or to recognize. And all you have to do is walk around looking for them, kind of like Easter egg hunting. And that's what this philosophy really is. That's what the Vedanta really is, or Buddhism really is. It's learning to live with the understanding you are in the midst of God and have seen nothing else but that. And that ultimately that reality is your self, independent of particulars, that universal self. The purpose of Buddhist teaching is to point to life itself, existing beyond consciousness in our pure original mind. All Buddhist practices were built up to protect this true teaching, not to propagate Buddhism in some wonderful mystic way. What a wonderful honesty of things. What a beautiful purity of things. Try to imagine a religion that's not interested in propagating itself. What a freedom. What a beauty. What a thing to be worshipped. So we're not in this to propagate the Vedanta. We're not in this to propagate a philosophy or Hinduism or anybody's particular anything. We are in this to simply experience life, I love when Vivekananda says that, religion is not there to take away your enjoyments. Religion is there to teach you how to enjoy life without getting caught in it, so that you don't get caught in all of its suffering and all of its attachments, so that you're not sorry to die when the time comes. If you've lived a good life, you'll enjoy it because it is God everywhere present and always perfect. And when you die, you'll be happy to leave it because now there won't be having any sorting through that noisy mind to try and catch a glimpse of your beloved. You just get to be with the beloved, in the beloved, of the beloved. So religion is to free us from the fear of living and to give us that infinite freedom that only that alone is comfortable for the self. This world, remember, all the worlds and all the blankets in Maya are 6 inches too short. And so finally you'll have a blanket that fits when you when you come to your realization. But it never existed in the world of dream. So when we discuss religion, it should be in the most common and universal way. We should not try to propagate our way by wonderful philosophical thought. That's a breath of fresh air to me, to see that in a religious writing. Let's get over our distinctions, get over our separateness, get over our bestness. We're right. We've got the best philosophy. Oh, the other philosophies tell some truth, but ours somehow tell the whole truth in such a perfect and beautiful way. If you go to any religious group, even the Vedantists, everybody is all about their best. Oh, this is the best. Oh, this is the greatest. And of course, it should be that way because that's your spouse. Your religion is your spouse. And you should believe for your own health and safety that your spouse is the most beautiful or handsome person in the room, right? That's how you stay married. If you run around thinking everybody else's spouse is more beautiful, or that maybe 10 minutes with them will be better than 10 minutes with your own, well, you've got troubles. And in spiritual life, same thing. That's why we say, have your core, choose your scaffolding that you're going to build your well, I don't like the idea of building, dismantle, where you're going to dismantle your ego and stick with that religion. And then, but feel free to chit chat with the other spouses, feel free to learn from them and to befriend them, but always believe in your own heart that your spouse is the best one for you, and stick with them. But we don't need to go around trying to tell everybody else in the room that our spouse is the most beautiful or handsome spouse in the room. That's also going to cause problems. And that's the trouble in the world these days. It's everybody running around trying to tell everyone else, my spouse is the best one, and I'm married to them, and you should wish that you were too. That ain't going to work. So let's not do that. We should not try to propagate our way by wonderful philosophical thought. In some ways, Buddhism is rather polemical, with some feeling of controversy in it, because the Buddhist must protect his way from mystic or magical interpretations of religion. But philosophical discussion will not be the best way to understand Buddhism. If you want to be a sincere Buddhist, the best way is to sit. And that's true for any religion. The best way to realize the truth of all religions, or any religion, is to practice that religion, and to set up that time that is so fundamentally important. I'm teaching myself right now. It is so fundamentally important that we have our time with the beloved set apart, and that we're devoted to that we don't leave that. Because, for what, we've got 24 hours a day, 8 of them are sleeping, 16. So we've got 16 hours a day in which the world is constantly convincing us of change and bodies and minds, where the world is constantly trying to excite our desires and trying to get us to get caught up in problems and arguments and friendships and all these different things. This small little 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day that you set aside for practice has to counter all of that, not only with an equal force, but with a greater force, so that it can be undone, so that your hypnotization can be undone. And that, if it wasn't for the grace of the divine, who's, Thakur says, if you take 1 step toward him, he takes 16 steps toward you. And that's why our, 1, 2, 3, 4 hours a day can work, is because of grace. And also we're studying what's true. So if you study a little bit of what's true, the fact that it's true will help cascade it and give it more power to push against your delusions during the day. But be dedicated to your practice. Enjoy your practice. Be creative with your practice. Be involved in your practice. Lean into your practice. It should be, everybody's practice should be their own, and it should be a delight. It doesn't have to be the same thing every day. It's fine that way, and that's actually very helpful for calming the mind. But this is the divine. And in the devotional practices, which is really what we are, we're studying Buddhism, but we're studying it from a Vedantist bhakti perspective. Terribly illegal in some realms. But the whole point is to bring your heart fully into your life. And the only way to do that is through practice, through clearing the mind, letting that ego go, ultimately to its death, but its death is a beautiful thing. It's not death like death, but it's a beautiful thing because it will release you, that you've dreamed of your whole life, that you've dreamed of being the most loving, caring, open, strong, controlled, purpose-filled expression of divine love. So your practice is where that happens. We are very fortunate to have a place to sit in this way. I want you to have a firm, wide, imperturbable conviction in your zazen of just sitting, just to sit. That is enough. This is that whole thing. God is already here. Your awareness, your enlightenment is already here. It just needs to be recognized. It just needs to be found and then appreciated. And that's all that's necessary. If you can get this awareness of awareness strengthened within you, all of your faults, all of those ugly parts in you that you just don't like and that you tend to see in others, that those things will disappear. It is enough to sit in the awareness of the presence of the beloved. It's enough, because that presence is more than you've ever imagined. That divine love, that pure love, that unconditioned love is something we've never got to experience any other way. And through this grace, these teachings, you have access to that, and you transcend, which means you short circuit all of your troubles. You don't go and solve them all. You short circuit them by realizing they have nothing to do with you and emphasizing your freedom. All right, that's the end of that chapter. We've got lots of time, so we'll jump into Buddha's enlightenment. And this is the last chapter. We'll probably read the epilogue too, though. There's good stuff in there. But Buddha's enlightenment, his catchphrase is, if you take pride in your attainment or become discouraged because of your idealistic effort, your practice will confine you by a thick wall. All right. I'm very glad to be here on the day that Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bo tree. When he attained enlightenment under the Bo tree, he said, "It is wonderful to see Buddha nature in everything and in each individual." That would be beautiful. What he meant was that when we practice Zazen, we have Buddha nature, and each of us is Buddha himself, right? That little story I told about sitting in the shrine yesterday. And I was sitting there talking. I was talking about how when your mind is real noisy or it's impure, it's really bothering you, and you're becoming very self-conscious about it in the presence of the beloved. It's always a good idea to put your mind in your hand. And really, what the teaching is, and that is that you separate your identity from it. Put this noisy, bubbling mass of ness in your hand, and hold it out in front of you, so that you're observing it, and bring your ideal, either the Divine Mother or Buddha or Ramakrishna or Shiva, any of the names of the beloved. Have them sit there in your presence while the two of you look at this bubbling, oily, greasy mind in your hand and talk about it, right? Talk about your problems. So I was doing this one day with Mother, and I was kind of bemoaning the horrible condition of mind, but feeling a little defensive too. And I remember turning to Mother a little mischievously and saying, Ma, you would act exactly like I do if you were attached to this mind. If you had this mind, you would just be me if you had this mind. And that mischievous little smile that I imagined or that I saw or whatever in my mind on Mother's face, because she basically was like, hello, don't you think that's what this is all about? I am you with your mind. There's no you separate from me here. You're imagining yourself. I'm here and your mind is there, but they're both mine. And I don't know who you are. You're an imposter ego, and so that's the truth of it, that we don't map God onto the world. We do that initially because we're apes after all, but really what's going on is we recognize the reality that this is just a dream body. And who is it that's constructed this dream body and inhabiting it and telling their story through it? It is the beloved alone. And so this Buddha nature, not a mapped way of seeing, it is the truth of seeing, that this beloved, this divine, is everywhere. Not everywhere, it is everywhere. It's the everywhere itself. It's not the things in everywhere. It's the everywhere that's behind all of those things. Is God, is that beloved, that divine presence. What he meant was that when we practice Zazen, we have Buddha nature, and each of us is Buddha himself. By practice, he did not mean just to sit under the bo tree or to sit in the cross-legged posture. It is true that this posture is the basic one or original way for us, but actually what Buddha meant was that mountains, trees, flowing waters, flowers and plants, everything as it is the way Buddha is. It means everything is taking Buddha's activity, each thing in its own way. It's all God manifesting and having each of the pieces play its part in his or her story of divine love. This world is that story of divine love. The reason we can't see the world as a story of divine love is because we've got ego love. We see through ego. And so everything is measured about its goodness or its badness toward our body mind. So we measure the world. Our day is good if the mind is in a happy mood and the body is well fed and we've lost 5 pounds, the world is good. It's happy. It's easy to see God everywhere. Walk around thinking you're God. It's easy. But that morning you wake up, you're in a horrible mood. You go to make your cup of coffee and there's no creamer. And then you stumble around the house and you find that you're out of milk and, the butter falls the wrong side down on the floor. Suddenly you're in hell. Oh my God, I hate life. This is terrible, blah, 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 blah. But you see, one day is a heaven and one day is a hell. That's ego. That's building in the changing. That's building your identity in things that don't last. And we've got to remove our identity from body mind so that we stop interpreting the world according to body mind. Because the world to a body is going to be good sometimes and bad sometimes. And the world to a mind is going to be good sometimes and bad sometimes. But the world to the soul is the presence of its beloved all the time. So there's a steadiness, an unchanging bliss that is the song of life, the song of being, from the perspective of your spirit self. That's why we call it spiritual life. As if that's not obvious. Spiritual life is what? It's living a life from the point of spirit, not from the point of mind, not from the point of body, but from the point of Satchit Ananda. That's why we call it spiritual life. And that's why we're striving to be spiritual. What does spiritual mean? It doesn't mean we know a lot of religion. It doesn't mean we practice a lot of religion. It doesn't mean we live in a temple. What does it mean? It means that we live our life from the perspective of spirit, a spirit identified by Satchit Ananda, by love, by wisdom, and a knowing of isness, being. That depth of silence and peace, the peace that passes understanding, that is within you. That is what it is to be spiritual. And from that perspective, we see everything expressing God alone. Right? Those two examples that I know of, I'm always looking for more. So if you know them, email me. Any examples where like Thakur was sitting on the banks of the Ganges and he tells the disciples, he said, truly, I tell you, I could hear the eternal, the ancient mantras every time the waves lapped on the shore. The water was literally repeating the mantras, the ancient mantras. And when Rama and Sita are walking in the forest and Rama stops Sita, I'm always afraid I'm going to pair them wrongly and look like the idiot I am. But so Rama and Sita are walking through the woods, and Rama stops Sita, and he says, "Listen, can you hear?" And Sita says, "Hear what?" He says, "The birds are chanting the Vedas, you know." And so this is what it is to live in spirit. The world becomes your scripture. You find those love letters of the beloved, of the divine everywhere, because each moment is a snapshot of the perfect divine love, the perfect divine essence. But it cannot be seen when it's related to a body. It cannot be seen when it's related to a mind or to any particular. It can only be seen when the heart is open, when the mind is silent, and you, the observer, are the universal perceiver, not attached to a particular, but free. That's how we see this. That's how we understand this. That's how we know this. And that's why it can't be described, because all the stuff that you use to describe it is the same stuff that blocks it. So that's why sitting is good enough. But the way each thing exists is not to be understood by itself in its own realm of consciousness. That's none of this particularization. That's egoism. What we see or what we hear is just a part or a limited idea of what we actually are. And that's why mind has to stop. That's why the mind has to be cleared, because thought is always about particular, and thought is always linear. It includes the imagined past, the projected future, and the real now. But when the real now is coupled with that past and that future, it becomes a story. It becomes something unreal. It's no longer the present. It's no longer the direct manifestation. It's then a calculated perspective on the manifestation. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for pure mind, for silent mind. But when we just are, each just existing in his own way, we are expressing Buddha himself. You know, I've been thinking a lot about these trees, these redwood trees. they keep coming up in my thoughts in the last couple of weeks, because I can't wrap my head around what it would be to be a tree. And I try to keep measuring my own way of being with the way that I assume a tree is. Like a tree, it never thinks about where it's going to live. It's just there. And you think of a redwood tree that has been there for 2,000 years. I seriously doubt that that redwood tree sits there going into a quandary. I'm like, what is my purpose in life? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to be? What book should I read? What engagement should I have? You see, that's the difference in this nature. The tree is a tree. It just trees. That's what it does. It just trees. It leaves all of the rest of it to the divine. It doesn't worry about, oh my God, where am I going to get my next 10 minutes of sunshine from? Oh Lord, where am I going to get my next drink of water? Who's going to provide me with more bark? Oh God, it's been 2,000 years. You wouldn't believe how my feet hurt. This is not how a tree is. A tree, there's a profundity to the existence of a tree that it's the tree still can stand in one place without moving for 2,000 years and still find a purpose, a reason to be alive. It just didn't just die. It was like, oh my God, I have to stand here for 2,000 years. Forget it. I'm just going to die. It goes on. There's a profundity to that. Can you be a human being in the same way that a tree is a tree? Perfectly content to be, not calculating what you're going to do, what you're going to become, how you're going to act, what you're going to pursue, where you're going to get fed, where you're going to find a house, where you're going to find a mate. Can you be a human in the same way that a tree is a tree or a flower is a flower? Look at that flower. I get to walk to Greg's every day and I walk up and it's just one of the beautiful things here in town. Everybody has these beautiful flower gardens in front of their house. And this time of year with all this rain, they're just stunning. And I walk along and I sometimes just have to stop and I just have to look for a minute because I can't believe how much effort goes into a flower and how its beauty is just so spontaneous, and then it just dies. And there's no mourning for it. You never see the plants carrying a dead flower down the street, terribly sad that we have to bury this. They just drop off and the plant is still a plant. It just creates beauty for reason, yes, but it's a reason that's inherent in being a plant. And so learn to live that way. Just be. You're beautiful and your life creates beauty when it's lived that way. Because we, above flowers and above trees, have an ability to create beauty that propagates way beyond our visible self. We have the ability to add a love to the world that can literally reverberate around it, when it's practiced, when it's allowed to be in its perfection. So this is why we sit, because this is how we stop being crazy. We stop creating ideas on what our purpose is, what we should be doing, where we should be going, where we should live, how we're going to live, how we're going to eat, how we're going to clothe, and how we're going to find shelter. Live like the flowers, live like the trees. Learn to be like a redwood tree is. That is when you go into a redwood forest, if you haven't done it, let me create a desire, say, put it on your bucket list. Mother can slap my hand later. We go to a redwood forest and see the holy atmosphere that being a tree creates. Go sit in the ancient redwoods. Go up to Founder's Grove up in Northern California. It's about a 5-hour trip. Oh gosh, that's far away from most people for you. But it's just north of San Francisco. And you can walk through these ancient redwoods that have been there for 2,000 years. And the silence, the stillness, the peace of a redwood forest. It's unlike any other forest. It's just because you've got 2,000 years of pine needles underneath your feet, for one, which absorbs all sound. There's no undergrowth because there's no light, not enough light gets down there. So there's hardly any animals in a redwood forest also. And so you sit there and it's just a pristine stillness. And that's what is this. Yes.
Sorry, please continue. I'll say later.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
It was about the redwood forest.
Oh, well, please tell me about it.
You know, there was this clip they had sent about a TED talk by Radhanath Swami, and
Uh-huh.
it the redwood forest. Very interesting that they are so tall and so ancient, but they don't have deep roots. uh, what they do is, as the new saplings come, they entwine their small roots against each other. So there is like a whole labyrinth of roots under the soil, and that is their strength in standing erect for so long.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And a beautiful thing to think about, that it's their sangha that keeps them standing. Because that's
Yes.
right. They don't have roots deep enough to hold themselves up. So they all are holding each other up, entwining their roots around each other. That's true. And they don't bring water from the root to the top of the tree. Did you know that? They actually drink the fog, which is why they grow along the coast in California. They drink the fog from the top to bring the water in because there's not enough power to bring all that water 300 feet up into the air, for the top branches. But yes, it really is true. They are profound and they're beautiful. And actually, if you can't get to a redwood forest, just get to any forest. You can have that same, just nature. It's why Thakur tells you, as if he would have to tell us such a silly thing, because it's such a beautiful thing. Every now and then, get out into the temple, the real temple, the temple not made by right angles of ego. Get out into the temple of harmony where things have learned to live together. Get out there in the middle of the woods and sit there quietly. Don't browse Reddit. Don't check your messages. Throw your phone into the river and sit down and just be. Just be, because God has given such a beautiful demonstration of his nature everywhere around us. And, before we tear it all up, get out and go see it as it was, as it is, with the divine present in the middle of it. It's so easy to think about God when you're walking in the mountains or when you're sitting in the forest or sitting by a stream, because that's his temple. That's his temple. And you are the inner shrine of that temple. So naturally be in that environment and the puzzle will come together so beautifully. That's why I'm sure of it. That's why the tradition of monasticism starts in the mountains and the woods, the forest, because you are the shrine that's missing in the forest. Go, be that shrine in the manifestation of God where he's most easily seen. He can be seen anywhere. With some practice, he can even be seen in Silver Spring. In other words, when we practice something such as Zazen, then there is Buddha's way or Buddha nature. When we ask what Buddha nature is, it vanishes. But when we just practice Zazen, we have a full understanding of it. Why is that? Because if you're sitting there asking the question, you're trying to put Buddha nature in front of you. You're trying to observe it, right? You're trying to learn about it. You can't put your nature in front of you. It is you. And so you can't calculate on it. You have to shut up and be it. Not an interpretation of it, just a silent being, it. And that is what manifests in the holy person. When we ask what Buddha nature is, it vanishes. So when you go looking for a good meditation, it's going to vanish. You can't go searching for bliss. You can't go searching for a good meditation. You can't go searching for God, right? All of that effort done in that way will keep God behind you. God will be running along behind you, but you'll be looking for him. Where are you? And he'll be jumping. He'll be doing all kinds of things behind you, but you'll be so enthralled with your search. You'll be like, When we ask what Buddha nature is, it vanishes. But when we just practice Zazen, we have a full understanding of it. The only way to understand Buddha nature is just to practice Zazen, just to be here as we are. So what Buddha meant by Buddha nature was to be there as he was, beyond the realm of consciousness, beyond the realm of change. sit at the edge of change and watch it from your shrine of the absolute, unchanging within. Buddha nature is our original nature. We have it before we practice Zazen and before we acknowledge it in terms of consciousness. Yes, it's always there. I'm just going to read here till the end of the chapter, and then we'll stop for the day. When you give up trying to understand it, hear that? When you give up trying to understand it, which means trying to put it into thought form or into the mind, when you give up trying to understand it, true understanding is always there. Usually after Zazen, I give a talk, but the reason people come is not just to listen to my talk, but to practice Zazen. We should never forget this point. The reason I talk is to encourage you to practice Zazen in Buddha's way. So we say that although you have Buddha nature, if you are under the idea of doing or not doing Zazen, or if you cannot admit that you are Buddha, then you understand neither Buddha nature nor Zazen. But when you practice Zazen in the same way as Buddha did, you will understand what our way is. We do not talk so much, but through our activity, we communicate with each other, intentionally or unintentionally. We should always be alert enough to communicate with or without words. If this point is lost, we will lose the most important point of Buddhism. All right, so we'll stop there for the day. There's going to be some good stuff in that last couple paragraphs. I don't want to rush through that. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? Good jokes? Ideas? All right. Such as it is. Do your practice. enjoy your day deeply today. And don't forget to laugh and be with the beloved. And, someone come to this remembrance of who you are.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Yes. Jai Mas.